Awesome. All right, so we are recording. Hopefully my camera doesn't blur out too much. All right, so perfect. All right, cool. All right, so today we're going to do a little bit of an AMA with founder of HikeSEO.co and Drake over there at Huckabye.com. And the goal here is to give you guys a little bit of a well-rounded discussion on everything from prioritization of SEO tasks and really what to do with the bandwidth and the time and the team and the money that you have. And then get into starting discussion around structured data and really what sites look like to bots and how you can optimize the site to be crawlable and ready, and what tools and tactics and strategies around structured data we can give you now. And then after this, we have a course coming that's free for everybody. If you do want a little more deeper dive into this topic, we will have a course from both Andy and Drake on the topic of SEO as a service for clients and then just better SEO in general. So I'll leave it over to, let's start with Andy over there. Why don't you introduce yourself, talk about Hike real quickly, and then I'll go back to Drake, and then we'll start off with Google's algo update.
Cool. Yeah, so my name's Andy. I'm a co-founder of Hike SEO. I've been in SEO for about, I think it's just over about eight and a half-ish years. Started agency side, worked for a few agencies, and then went client side to kind of see what it was like on the dark side. Then did a bit of consulting and freelance before getting together with my current business partner, and we developed Hike SEO. Really as a platform to allow anyone, whether with SEO experience or not, to be able to build an SEO strategy, and then how to implement that SEO strategy through a prioritized list of actions that you need to complete. Yeah, that's pretty much me.
All right, Drake, quick introduction.
Yeah, for sure. My name's Drake. I'm a senior account executive, and I'm heading up our partnership channel for Huckabye. I've been with the team for just about a year and a half now. Main things that we're up to really as a company, we're a technical software company first. We do have a services arm, but we're really oriented towards making sure that a website is perfect for Google. When they show up, we want to make sure that they're having really the best experience possible, making sure that they can understand the information, making sure it's structured in a manner that they can understand, and really get through the content and what you've invested in as quickly and as efficiently as possible. That's really kind of the bread and butter of what we're up to.
Awesome, guys. Yeah, and I think the big thing that's going on now that we want to talk about real quickly is Google's algorithm update and what's coming, and that dovetails nicely into the conversation. And for Rick and whoever else just joined, we're going to talk real quickly about prioritization, general SEO, what's happening. Then we'll get into the nitty gritty on structured data stuff right after that. So Andy, Drake, whoever wants to start with Google's algo update, I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, what we're specifically talking about is Google's announcement of their new page experience update. Which is actually keeping in theme with how Google have kind of gone about things with their algorithm updates over the past 3-4 years, maybe. In terms of it's more of a consolidation act for them as opposed to introducing new updates. So it kind of happened really similar with we used to have individual. Everyone's had like Penguin, Panda. Ones that targeted specific ranking factors. So Penguin was backlinks, Panda was content. But they don't really give you that information anymore, because what they do is they've rolled out those specific algorithm updates into what they call a core algorithm update, which is really good for them, but it's kind of tricky for the SEO community because I don't know, we had a big one in May, for example, core algorithm update. But it's very hard to diagnose, if your site was hit, what was it? What was it particularly they were looking for? Why was it that you were dropped? So this page experience update is kind of similar. They're amalgamating other updates, other algorithm or ranking algorithm features such as HTTPS, page speed, and mobile usability. And they're packaging it up into one single update called experience. There is a couple of new things that are being added into it as well. What's nice about this though is that they're being very transparent about it. So they're telling you, right, here are the things that we're looking for. this is what's going to impact, is going to impact your rankings, but we're going to give you loads of notice, which is really nice, right? I mean, it's not going to be live until, I think, is it end of this year or beginning of next year? And they said they're going to give us plenty of warning. So that's, from an SEO point of view, that's really nice. So thank you.
And Drake, anything you missed on that update?
I think you nailed it right in the head, and I think it is very rare for them to give this much of a heads up, right? They were months out, and I think it's planned to launch like early 2021 is the date that I saw. And the big piece that we're really focusing on is user page speed experiences, right? So there's a heavy influence on making sure that the user experience is as best as possible with this update. So the big one that we're focusing on as a company is the page speed portion. We've actually been trying to figure out a plug and play type model from a software perspective over the last like 8-9 months, and without really knowing that this was coming. So we're getting ready to launch something that should help along the lines of really where this update is heading in this core update. So we're excited about it. We're definitely bullish. It's something to look really towards the future. So I think Andy hit it on the head.
Awesome. Yeah. And if I'm an agency that's offering services around whether it's web development or content or SEO, what are some of the things that maybe I should start prepping for? We're 6 months out. Any services I should start thinking about offering, or just optimizations in general, or what should I start doing today to get ready for that?
Yeah, I think it should start to be baked into what you're doing already, right? I think that's quite nice, because it allows the agency to clearly communicate, look, here's something that's coming, right? So we actually know for once this is coming, and this is going to impact your visibility in the SERPs. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to act now from a development point of view, in terms of your website structure, technical SEO. We need to act now, because we want to be in the best place possible. And Google Google already given you all the tools to track this. I mean, PageSpeed is just the kind of like canonical example, right? So that's really good. It can be a bit of a rabbit hole to go down towards PageSpeed. Like, there are so many things you can do to increase PageSpeed, and like, how much do you really want to work on your deferring JavaScript? It's really difficult. I mean, there are I always think, like, with certain page speed actions, and it'll probably be the same across all of these, there'll be like the 80-20 rule. There'll be the things that the 20% of things that you do will make 80% of the difference. But overall, just look at them individually. Mobile usability is already there, so look at that. More importantly, look at the first meaningful paint, and that's what they're really trying to highlight with this one. They've got a really nice GIF. I don't know if you saw it, Drake, of like when someone goes to like press buy now or like cancel an order, and then because the page hasn't loaded, then as they go to press it, the page loads and it says order now. And so they've actually ordered something instead of like canceling an order. Yep. So that's obviously working with usability. It's working with page speed. All the documentation starts to be there. And to be fair, more is going to come from Google as well. But the fact that they're actually communicating means that you can start to have the conversations with the clients now, and you can start to prepare. You can go, okay, right, let's make sure we've got a budget for the next 6 months or next 3 months. We're going to do a big project on this. There's going to be an initial strategy where we're going to review your website in terms across all of these. And then what we're going to do is have an implementation. So it seems to fit really nicely with an additional service that you can start to think about. And what they've already given us is already given us like the top level bits, I'd say.
Yeah.
So changed the tooling. Their Google PageSpeed tools has already switched completely. I don't know if you saw that, to reflect changes. So there's no reason to kind of sit and wait. I think now is the time to start playing with this, because like you mentioned, there's so many different factors that go into it. Why not start tinkering with it, playing with it to see what's working today, so that when we do get to 2021, you're at least ahead and you're not behind. So
so prioritization. I mean, this is the next topic that we want to hit on. So it's a situation where depending on your purview, depending on what you're doing now and what department you're in or what agency relationships you have, it's a situation where what should I be thinking about, and what really matters. I mean, I'm dealing with this as we speak with my site flip, and we lost a bunch of traffic, lots of 404s, and I expected it, and I wasn't planning to have everything right, but now I have to climb out of that hole, and I have to start thinking about really what is a priority for me and what should I start thinking about. So you know, crawling the site and testing it and doing all that aside, what are some of the main things that you're seeing pretty globally with what should sites really start thinking about? What is a priority? Is it backlinks? Is it content? Is it, you know, what should be number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 for the most part?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's kind of important, and it's important to kind of communicate to clients. We see a lot of that because we work with businesses or agencies who might not be like full like dedicated SEO agencies. It might just be like part of the service that they do. Is about understanding that no ranking factor in and of itself is the be all and end all. We'd always get a client or a customer be like, well, you know, my page loads quicker than these guys. Why are they above me? You know, or, you know, I've got more backlinks. Why are they above me? So well, each of these ranking factors have their own weighting within the algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, you can have the fastest website in the world, but if your content's crap, if your backlinks are poor, then that's going to weigh you down no matter what. So to know individual ranking factor, you know, just makes, you know, decides whether you rank or not. But then again, so what you have to, I guess, work to is kind of what we do in SEO, which is working towards the best practices. And it's really hard to argue that it still comes down to content and links. It's like it's like a real like vague answer that, you know, like I think it was a couple of years ago that an SEO Googler came out and said, yeah, I think it's like content links your top 2 ranking factor, and then it's rank brain, which is their AI algorithm, which you can't analyze. So what you want to be doing is you want to be looking at those ranking factors which you know have the most amount of impact on the algorithm, and try and optimize those as much as possible. So you want to be looking at, yeah, the content itself and the content depth of your website, the content quality, from an actual content point of view, like is in like, okay, the content that I've created, how thin is it? How thick is it? Am I writing content for SEO sake, or I'm actually answering the purpose? Am I answering questions that my customers are asking? Am I creating content that is getting a high entity score in Google's natural language API, for example? Like, am I actually really thinking about the content in those terms? That's still probably the best place to start, because it's easier to analyze, and it's easier to do an audit, and then it's easier to correct and have like a plan in place to do it. Yeah, I'd say that. And then backlinks, I hate saying it, it feels like 101, but it's so important to maintain, especially from an agency's point of view. I'd say one of the key things, probably first place to start, is just cleaning up the backlink profile as well. With SEO been going on for so long now, there are so many websites that have been around, have been through multiple SEO agencies before they've even got to you. And some agencies are better than others when it comes to building backlinks. Some will take more shortcuts. So doing that kind of backlink health check, like clean, put yourself on kind of a level footing before then moving forwards and actually building on top of that. I think is a really, really key important thing to do.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Yeah. And Drake, expand on that if you have anything to expand on.
Yeah. So I totally agree from like a foundational standpoint. Make sure that everything's clean, right? You have to have clean backlinks. You have to have clean content. That's really the foundation. If you don't start there, you're kind of missing the boat. And then it's never a box that you can just check. You can't just walk away from it. As Indy was saying, it's always something that you're going to be updating, adding to, changing. SEO, unfortunately, is one of those things you can check a box and walk away. So that's just kind of the reality of it.
Yeah. On that note, you know, I don't want to go too deep into just the content side, but I do want to know, you know, hammering a keyword and creating that depth versus sort of expanding into a wider range of keyword offerings. And this, I put some links in here. We've got Verblio on, you know, Huckabye and Hike. You know, these are tools that you can check out. But I also added Phrase as one. Definitely want to plug them right here, because what you don't know that the keyword tools out there really don't tell you is what your site traffic are on your site for right then and there, right? And this is where the depth of those answers plays nicely into your SEO strategy. Is like, yeah, you want that keyword because it's being searched a lot, but are people actually coming to your website and looking for that content to buy your service or your client's service, right? That's a tough question to answer. What are they there for, right? You can get a lot of traffic around a keyword and create a really deep piece of content for it, but are those readers looking to buy your service or your client's service? That's a tough question. So I added phrase there, but what are some of the tactics around creating that SEO driven strategy around buying type keywords, and how do you find those, and anything around that? I mean, that's just selfishly, that's something that I've struggled with for a long time, but anything around that we can talk about?
I think one of the advice I always give, and we try to make sure that our users do it, is to think about the funnel as a whole, the sales funnel as a whole. So you need to think, you know, when someone's buying your products and they're going through the entire journey, like what are they searching for at what points in time? Like, how are they narrowing down, you know, what questions they're asking before they decide, right, this is the product that's for me, and then they try and find that product. And then it's about how you structure your content to actually answer that. So you might, you know, e-com's really simple example. Someone wants to buy a TV, they're going to search, you know, TVs for sale. Then they're going to figure out they want a Samsung TV. Then they're going to search Samsung TVs. Then they're going to go back and go, okay, I want a UHD Samsung TV, and they're going to search that. And then they might eventually get to, okay, I want to buy model UX25LQ, whatever it is, right? And then at that point, they'll want to purchase. So at the top of the funnel, you've got like a really high search volume, and then at the bottom of the funnel, you've got really low search volume, but the conversion rate's a lot higher. It's about thinking, okay, well, how can I create content to actually be visible at all stages of that funnel? And what's the key part of that is understanding what kind of content does Google want to rank each part of that funnel, because you need to understand what Google thinks the intent of the user is. So, real simple example, best TVs for sale. If you go to Google, you're probably going to see a bunch of review sites. You're going to see blog posts or informational based content. So trying to optimize that in a category page or a product page just isn't going to work. However, at the bottom of the funnel, you know, if someone's searching for a specific product, if you go to Google, you're going to see product pages. There's no point you trying to optimize that in the blog post or optimize it anywhere else, because Google just knows the intent of the searcher is to buy. So I think you need to think about the funnel and where you're optimizing that content, and then what the intent is that Google thinks is, and matching your content to that intent to give you the best chance of ranking for that.
Yeah, got it. Yeah. Okay. So, and you know, we're happy to have Verblio on, Natalie at verblio.com. So it's another scenario there where Natalie, if you do have anything that's interesting that's come up in just the partnership conversations that you've had around, you know, how to structure that content creation budget. Really, we're talking about prioritization. Part of that is budgeting. You got $1,000 for that client's content budget plus your margins, whatever that is. Have you seen anything really interesting and working where people are coming back for that and expanding on that budget because of blank? Anything relevant?
Yeah, nothing really big comes to mind, although I will say that clients that use us for SEO content typically do come back to us because they're starting to see the results. And so that's partially why we're subscription based. We do have a couple different packages where we will kind of assess your whole content strategy and work with you and use, you know, any other SEO tool that you're using and look at that data and help walk you through creating requests for content and, you know, what should you be requesting and things like that. But yeah, really it's just I think the consistency and making sure you're hitting the right notes and the right keywords and things like that. And so that's where someone like Hike and Huckabye is important, because we can help you create the content, but if you're not hitting the right keywords, that's not going to be, an effective or efficient use of your budget.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for that. And let's do this. So, you know, Andy, I mean, I've got a couple more questions for you, but, talk to me about, you know, how voice search. I think this is something that you guys at Hike are dealing with right now. I think you're productizing some stuff around this right now, but what is going on with voice search? Should we even be thinking about that? Is there a service that an agency can offer around voice search? Anything at all?
Yeah, so it's still at very early days for voice search, in terms of kind of the tracking you can do. For example, like to try and understand how many times your content is appearing on a Google Home device, or how often it's appearing in a Hey Siri search. That kind of just level of tracking isn't there at the minute. But we know from data the amount of people actually using those searches. I mean, I use them all the time. I'm always asking Google for stuff. It's skyrocketing. So there's huge opportunity there. It's something that we are probably going to build out a feature, not anytime soon, but probably in the next year or so, because it's going to be such an important part of the landscape. But the way that you can do it now is almost doing it the way that so for example, in Hive, we'll help you to find content ideas, right? So what are my customers searching for in Google? What are the typical questions that people have? What are the what's, the whys, the wheres, the who's, the whens around different topics that you're interested in? That is one area that you can start to understand, because if they're questions that people are typing, they're questions that people are asking as well. And then in order for you to be the result that, that Google gives, you want to be in that, they call it position 0, right? You've probably seen, like when you search Google and above those 10 listings, you'll get that little box where Google just gives you the answer. That's position 0. And that typically powers the voice search result. So if you can optimize your content, if you can create the content that answers that question, optimize that content, you go in position 0, you're giving yourself the best chance then of actually being relayed in the answer that the voice assistant is going to give. So you need to start thinking about the who's, the whys, the wheres. What are the questions that people ask at the top of the funnel, maybe even towards the bottom of the funnel, and create content around that. Or make sure that your content is optimized for those questions, and that's going to give you the best chance of like driving more traffic from voice search.
Awesome. Anything on that, Drake, before we go into the next topic?
Yeah, I'll jump in there too, because I think, Andy, you're hitting it right on the head. You got to have the content first. You got to make sure you're answering the right questions, making sure you're thinking about the full. I think this is where Huckabye plays very nicely with Hike. And I think this conversation really is great because content you create first, and that's always the first piece that you got to generate. Then you got to start thinking about, as Andy was talking about, structuring it in a manner that makes sense, right? And one of the pieces that goes into structuring that content is structuring it for Google. And that's something called structured data, which I think we were leaning towards. But structured data is basically a language that is a machine-to-machine language for Google. And it helps rank this content and all this generation that you've spent all your time and money on within that position 0. It really lends itself very well to ranking for rich results, rich snippets, position 0, all of that. So structured data does have a big piece when it comes to powering voice search and those rich result positions too.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a perfect dovetail. So we want to weaponize everybody with services to offer. That's the big thing here. Relevant services, content marketing, of course, go deep on the content. But we have some new keywords that are coming up more and more. Buying keywords from your target customers or your current clients that they want help. They hear things like structured data. They hear things like JavaScript rendering. They hear these terms. And maybe they don't know, and maybe their in-house marketing person does not know. But what can we talk about first that's relevant, that's doable? And first start with, I guess, what is structured data, and then we'll go into that conversation.
Yeah, for sure. Structured data, as I was mentioning, really is just a machine-to-machine language. So it's a language where you can structure your website and the content that you've built in a manner that is very easy for Google to understand, rather than having to crawl and understand it from HTML, JavaScript, whatever's going on from a page speed build perspective. You can structure it in a manner that they want and that they can understand. And because you're structuring it in a manner that they want and they can understand, then they're able to start leveraging it in different ways. So we've all probably seen it as we're searching around within Google ourselves. You start to see like star ratings showing up, you see pricing showing up, and you see Google starting to answer questions within search results. That is all really powered by structured data. And that's why we're leaning very heavily on it. And we think it's really important and going towards the future of making the user experience as good as possible or as easy as possible, especially within search, right? So within search results, that's where Google's heading. They want to keep people on google.com. So they're starting to enhance this entire experience within Google. And this is the type of information and the type of language that does power all of that rich experience within search results. So you can start to influence your brand within those search results. You can start to populate more information beyond just that standard blue link. The standard blue link has been there forever. It's how it's always been. But why not now start to enhance it, bring more information about your products, your services, start to answer these FAQs, how-tos, all that information, all within search results is really, it's where they're heading.
Yeah. And what can an agency that maybe is doing SEO to some degree or doing content marketing, maybe web development, but what can they actually talk about around structured data with some authority? I mean, what sort of, strategy can you give them there if they do want to jump into a conversation with their website or their client's website about structured data?
I think Andy hit this one really well. Is like answering questions is probably the easiest one today. If you're going to have a question with your client, start thinking about FAQs, start thinking about the questions, top of funnel, and then all the way throughout, like as Andy was mentioning. Then you start to layer on structured data and really give that website a voice to Google and starting to answer the questions within search results. That's probably the easiest way to get started with structured data. From a content perspective, you got to start there. Then you layer on the structured data piece and start to answer questions within. That is probably the lowest hanging fruit when it comes to structured data and kind of zero click opportunities.
Awesome. Any Chrome extensions that you recommend for just kind of doing a quick little, is the site structured correctly?
So Google's got a tool once again. So Google's structured data testing tool. That's who we use. We use that, and then Google PageSpeed Insights are kind of the two big ones that we use internally. The structured data testing tool is great, though. It's unfortunate though you have to go URL by URL, but it at least gives you some insight into what you might have today. If you have nothing, then you have to become a structured data basically like expert in figuring out what you qualify for.
Yeah, so you can do it manually, go page to page. And we were looking at a Chrome extension. Was it Wappalizer? Can get you some information. Was that the one we used on my site?
Yeah, so Wappalizer we use for some different use cases. So Wappalizer is basically like a built with. It identifies all the technologies that a website is built with. So we use Wappalizer to understand if a website's using a CDN, if it's built with any sort of JavaScript frameworks, any JavaScript libraries, those sorts of things.
Okay, yeah. So you can start to qualify your clients, your book of business. You can go maybe create a list of all of your clients' websites, load each one of them, run Wappalizer on there to see what they're missing, what they don't have, see what they're built on, start to formalize sort of a smaller list of maybe ideal prospects for a structured data type conversation or an SEO conversation in general. That sort of process.
Yeah, when it comes to structured data in that piece, I would say almost 90% of the websites that I come across when I'm just out there looking around could use an automated platform for structured data. A lot of people have like very high level structured data. They're talking about the organization. They're telling Google that this is a website. It's a very, very high level information, which is a great start. It's better than having nothing. So the best way to really understand that is the testing tool. And then the other piece when it comes to like qualification and looking at your customers, Wappalizer is really great for understanding like frameworks. If a site is built on a React or some sort of JavaScript full framework, that is something where dynamic rendering plays very, very nicely with, because Google has a really difficult time, as we all probably know, or maybe we don't. Google has a really, really difficult time understanding JavaScript when a site is built in it. They have to put it into a render queue, and it can take anywhere from like 2 to 5 weeks to actually render your site to get it into their index to then show up within search results. So if that's something that you're seeing in your clients, it should be not necessarily like a red flag, but just something to note. It's something that could be playing into their content necessarily not being understood as well as it should be today. You've spent all the time on the content, and now it's for some reason not showing up in the index, and that's potentially a piece of why that's happening.
Yeah, and my website, our website, our partner programs is the perfect example of what not to do. It is not structured in any way, and a lot of the pages are rendered from the database and they're not there. They're not, it's hard for me to even articulate because I'm dealing with the developers on this as well. And a lot of these no-code platforms, a lot of these headless XYZ, these Node.js, Bubble's a big one. They are not out-of-box structured. They are not ready for search out-of-box. You do have to do a lot of work, and a lot of clients, especially in the SaaS world, marketplace clients, these types of builds, they're moving from custom to these no-code platforms like we did. To save money on development and get it done quicker. That's great. But what they have when they're finished is a pretty unstructured, terrible for search website. So as an agency, you can fit in nicely right there and bring a couple of solutions and run some audits and come to them with hey, here's what we need to do to make sure that this good looking new site of yours actually keeps its rankings and continues to grow organically. So anything on that you've seen from these Node and other JavaScript framework sites, these no code sites that you've seen? Are you dealing with that at all, Drake?
Yeah, so we haven't gone into like the CMS world and kind of gone after the head of the snake there. We work very well with WordPress sites, so that's something that we focused on pretty heavily recently. Is WordPress sites tend to play very nice with our software, and the cool thing is our software is a plug and play style, and a lot of times you won't see a ton of JavaScript firing on a WordPress site, but WordPress sites in general, when you think about them and how they're built, they're not the best when it comes to user page speed. So as you're starting to think about the future of 2021 and this algorithm update, if it's a WordPress site, you should start working on it today. But then there's this other half of things where when Google's showing up to do their indexation job and really understand the content there, they're probably having a hard time just waiting for that site to load. So WordPress is probably the biggest one that we've worked with today. I'd have to look at the other ones and really kind of dive into them. But I imagine that these headless CMSs and no-code development sites will lend themselves very well to software.
Yeah, that's the next thing I want. And Andy, you deal a lot with WordPress sites and just the backlog and what's going on in general. So maybe talk. I know you have something you wanted to say, but also if you can talk to those WordPress sites that think they have everything covered, because WordPress is pretty well set up and for SEO, and there's plugins like Yoast that can get your clients and your websites a good portion of the way. But talk on the back of what Drake mentioned on what should they be thinking about, where should they look, and what are some tactics that they can use to better that whole SEO agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. One of the things that we find is we'll speak to people who go, oh, yeah, my SEO is fine, I've got Yoast. Or, yeah, my SEO is fine because my CMS platform says it's SEO friendly. And, that is completely true, right? What it means is that, certain technical elements will be fixed. Like you'll make sure that, you haven't got any broken links, any 404s, anything that can impact you. But kind of fixing those bits or having the ability to fix them is only going to get you a part of the way. What you really want to be thinking of is the step before that, which is, okay, but what's the ultimate strategy? If your client wants to be at the top for a keyword, right? They need to find out what that keyword is. They need to find out what those phrases are that their customers are using. What's the available opportunity, the search volume, the difficulty, what kind of content they need to create, what kind of website structure do they need to have? They need to dedicate a page, can they optimize on an existing page? Because that's what's going to help them get to the top Google for those keywords. Just by ensuring that, they've got an XML sitemap up and running, which is vital, or they haven't got any 404s, Google's not going to go, oh, well, do you know what? Then I know exactly what keyword they want to go from get to the top. There has to be a strategy behind it. So I think making sure that you have that discussion with the client and they understand and you understand what is it that they should be going for in their SEO. That's really, really key. But then, tools like Yoast are brilliant. So Hike works closely with it in terms of Hike will help you build the strategy, help you identify those opportunities. Hike will then tell you exactly what you need to do on the website. And then Yoast will help you implement it because Yoast makes it super simple to update a title, add a canonical, whatever it may be, those things are awesome. So yeah, I think just taking a step back, and that's really where it helps you, where you can build out a retainer product as well, and build out an ongoing service because you're looking at it from a more holistic point of view as in their entire strategy. I guess the only thing to mention before is we are seeing WordPress is still like killer in terms of like volume, just like Drake was saying there. It's just the biggest, but we are seeing more and more companies come to us with JavaScript framework websites, for JavaScript, which, as Drake alluded to, does have its issues with Google indexing for sure. Google's getting better. They've released their evergreen Google bot, and I think things are getting a lot better. So we are actually introducing the ability to be able to crawl sites fully and render sites fully in JavaScript. So if that's something that you only build in, because we were getting some agencies like, we only build in this, we need a solution. And other SEO tools don't render JavaScript, they just can't use them. So we want to make sure that we accommodate for those guys as well.
Yeah, and I think Drake, we had a question about, about what sites should be thinking about, but on the back end of that, I mean, I think we hit most of it, but I have one here. So, and this is something that came up a couple of times. There's a difference between sort of rendering and pre-rendering. When Google starts to index your site, when Google's actually crawling your site, there's pre-rendering and there's actually rendering. And what's the difference, and where does Huckabye fit in? And I think there's another provider out there called Pre-Render. That's a little misleading, but talk about that real quick.
Yeah, sure. So to take a step back and just explain Google's job when they show up to a site. When they show up, and if a site, let's say, for instance, is built on WordPress and there's a lot of JavaScript running. So they show up and their job is to understand the content and the information within the site, right? That's what Google does. So when they get there, they have to render the site. So they have to sit there and wait for basically all the different scripts to load. And then once everything has loaded for them, then they start indexing. So there's kind of a step there of what is called rendering. It's actually getting all this information to be delivered. So what Huckabye is doing and what we're essentially pre-rendering is the entire site. So we take a page, we render all the scripts, and then flatten everything so that when Google shows up, they can skip that entire step. They just show up, they get this flat HTML file that they would have previously had to build themselves to then put into the index. So there's this whole experience of just making this entire process more efficient and more streamlined for them. When it comes to prerender.io, they are pre-rendering upon request. So when Google shows up, instead of them having to render the information, so as we talked about, JavaScript is a little bit more difficult for them to understand, and they have now the Evergreen bot, but your site basically goes into a render queue. So pre-render helps you to skip out of that queue. So instead of you having to go to the JavaScript rendering bot, that's where pre-render comes in and renders upon request while Google's basically on the page. So it's a little bit of a different experience with pre-render versus Huckabye. Huckabye, we're basically delivering this version at edge to 200 cities around the world so that there's no indexation issues and there's no rendering needed upon request, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that does. And that's where I personally lost a little bit of just understanding of how it all works, and where Google's bot stops and where a SaaS like Huckabye fills in the gaps and what happens there. So it's really important.
Stop, right? They're not going to stop because they still have to understand the information. That's why they built JavaScript bots, and that's where they're continuing to get better about it. But just eliminating that factor and allowing Google to get through as much information while they're on site. The cool thing too with this type of product and with what we're doing is most times we're delivering the page itself because they're not waiting for anything and it's at edge around the world. We're delivering this specific URL or that page, generally speaking, about 50 to 100% faster than it is today. So there's that other kind of edge benefit too of like page speed and deliverability of the site too.
Got it. And I'll speak to costs real quick of just getting a site to render correctly and setting this whole thing up. And that puts us into what types of sites you need to think about this, or what types of clients that you may have. So talk to me real quickly about some of the time and numbers around if I wanted to actually do this for my website and I have 50,000 pages and there's probably maybe 100 of those pages that I really want to focus on. What would I have to do if I wanted to do this internally or with my web development team? Talk to me about that, and then talk to me about the world that we'll live in if and when Google does learn to crawl JavaScript sites correctly. And we'll go back to Andy for a prioritization list of some what to do today to make sure you're helping your clients out.
Yeah, definitely. So as far as like how to get started per se, so one, make sure that your site has JavaScript, right? That's the biggest culprit. Pretty much every website out there can benefit from an increased page speed there, but make sure that the site has JavaScript. That's the biggest factor. The second biggest factor is making sure that you can integrate with a CDN with Cloudflare. So we're built basically on the backside of Cloudflare. And then when it comes to getting started, we generally recommend delivering this type of product across an entire site rather than selecting a subset of like 100 out of the 50,000. Generally speaking, there's no reason to just really focus in on a couple rather than giving Google this perfect experience across the entire page. And then you start to rank for as much information as you possibly can, which is all full circle back to SEO, right? You want to rank for as much information, as much keywords. So why not give them the best experience? As far as costs go, there's a pretty wide range. I can give a range. It's basically anywhere from like $800 up to about $10,000 a month. There's a lot of different factors that really go into it. But if you think about the job that Huckabee is kind of taking out is Google's job, right? So it can be pretty expensive to render a page. And as the site gets bigger and bigger and bigger, the costs obviously continue to go up. That's why it is such a huge range. It is for like anywhere from like 800 to 10 grand, just depending on the size of the site, integration points, all those different factors too.
Yeah, and that's time that the website managers, developers, whoever would have to spend to go ahead and make sure that it was doing the job correctly. It's a tough job to make sure all those pages are rendered correctly if you were to do it.
Yeah, a lot of times you don't really know, right? You just kind of hope and cross your fingers. I hope Google's doing their job and indexing my site, right? That's kind of the reality of a lot of these sites. And now you're able to basically say, yes, we can build as much as we want on top of what we have today and know that SEO is going to be a box that is checked from a indexation standpoint. You can continue to build, change, and Huckabee is always going to be building that version that's perfect for Google in the back.
Awesome. And yeah, I think we got all the main FAQs. If anyone else has any that we did not hit on, please add them to the chat and I'll make sure they get asked and answered. But back to Andy, I think I want to close out with any thoughts that you have, but, giving everyone some action items, what should I do if I want to better my generic SEO strategies? And what should I do if I want to start offering an SEO service for my clients? Give me those two worlds and some of the action items that you'd say, start here, look at this, start formalizing something around this. And obviously the tool hikeseo.co will offer a really awesome value proposition in this mix, but talk about that.
Yeah, sure. So I think in terms of a generic SEO kind of strategy, or whether it's, your own agency website or your clients, you need to have the data points. You need to understand, okay, right, there are how Google works is there are ranking variables that it evaluates. Each one has its own weighting. That's the job of an SEO, is to reverse engineer how powerful or how heavy each weighting is. And then decide upon, okay, what the actions. But in order to do that, you need to have, you can manually collect the data. It's going to take you years, lots and lots of years. Or you can use great software, right? And software, what that's going to do is that's going to enable you to gather that data very, very quickly for your clients. Now, what you need to understand then is, okay, how am I going to prioritize this? So I know that I'm deficient in this area. I'm strong here, but I'm deficient here. Is that where I'm deficient? Does that actually matter too much? Because I'm deficient here and here, which one do I need to work on first? How much time should I allocate to let's say cleaning up a poor backlink profile, increasing my page speed, creating new content, whatever it may be? How much time do I allocate that compared to something else? Now that, you can reverse engineer competitors. That's probably a good way to do it, because you can see the weight in which they've done it. Difficult way to do it though, because websites have been around for a long time. Alternatively, it's a bit of a plug, but you can use something like Hike. What Hike tends to, what we do, is we don't really give you the raw data as such. Now, if you've used other SEO tools, you'll know that you get back all of this data, and it's all like really good SEO data. And if you're someone that is very proficient in SEO, you know how to interpret that data and what you need to do, whether it's for your own agency or for your clients, right? You know what to do first. So I can take data and I can understand, like Drake could as well, and go, right, do this, this, and this. But typically that might not be the case for everyone in your organization. It might not be the case for everyone in your team. You might not have the time to do that. So what Hike's going to do is it's going to prioritize those actions for you. It's going to take, okay, what's the strategy you want to build? Where are you deficient? Where are you strong? Where are your competitors weak? Where can you beat them? And it's going to then give you a prioritized action list. And what that's going to enable you to do is then quite simply be able to provide a service for a client. We try to help agencies to build out an SEO product, but also to understand with the existing SEO product, how can they streamline it and make it better? You know, how can they make it, you know, how can they do better results for their clients? So yeah, I think doing an analysis at first, probably the easiest place, you know, if you're looking for an SEO, have you got any SEO opportunities with your clients, is looking at their performance, like how well they're doing. This is always the easiest way to identify an opportunity. Here's some keywords that we know your customers are probably going to use and you're not ranking for them. From there, you can then go through the whole process of deciding, okay, what should the strategy be? How can we make sure our website's indexable? You know, maybe you have to use something like Huckabuy. And then how can you build an SEO strategy, which Hike will help you to do, and then creating content and making those changes as well. And then obviously you've got Verbio, which help you write that content as well. If you don't, you know, if you're not an expert at writing content for SEO, you know, it can be quite difficult. So outsource and make sure you've got someone that's really good at it and does it all the time. It just makes a world of difference.
Yeah, and Robert did have a question that I think we kind of touched on, but this is probably for Drake, where you know, there's sites that probably aren't quite ready for Huckabuy, whether that's budget restrictions or what have you. But are there any tools? Are there any, you know, low-hanging fruit type tactics that they can add today, plugins, whatever, if they're dealing with WordPress specifically, that helps them with the structured data problem?
Yeah, so Andy, you mentioned Yoast earlier. So Yoast does a little bit of structured data as a part of their platform. So it's one way of getting started. The structured data piece for Huckabuy 2 is quite a bit cheaper than the price range that I was giving earlier. I probably should have mentioned that was kind of for the dynamic rendering portion. So when it comes to the structured data piece, that is definitely a lower end range. It is a fully automated product. There's definitely a couple of different players out there. I think Schema App, Yoast, and Huckabuy are probably the three biggest players out there. And then there's also the Google highlighting tool as well. So you can go in and do it yourself if you want. They built out the platform for you to basically try and do it yourself. It's just a matter of how much you can get in and how qualified it is, et cetera, et cetera.
Awesome. Yeah. And, you know, I think starting and making sure that speed is priority number one. I think everybody would agree. Structured data is a part of that. But Andy, maybe we end with some of the top priorities and some of the processes that you can go through to just check off the boxes and make sure that you've got at least the groundwork covered and at least the thought process covered. What should those priority lists be?
That's a good one. Drake, you might have to help me out here. So I'd say, yeah, right. Page speed, check that off. Use Google PageSpeed Insights. If you want just a quick tool to analyze your page speed, go to PageSpeed Insights. It will give you everything that you need to do to fix it. A page at a time, right, which is a pain. That's why using a software, a SaaS, you know, like us guys, will give you more than that. But you can do that. Page speed, indexation, right? I mean, we've talked a lot about indexation. If you want to make sure your site's being crawled, I mean, Search Console, set that up. That's probably actually top tip, actually. Above everything, I ignore everything else I say. That's probably the one thing you need to do. But you can go to Google and you can do like a site search. I love doing this. Just go to Google, put in SITE, the colon symbol, and then your domain. And essentially what it's going to bring back is pretty much every single URL that Google's got indexed for your website. So make sure that all your key pages are there. If you see nothing there, then be worried. You might have a JavaScript issue. You might need something like Huckabuy there. Let's see. My mind's going blank on other things. Content. So if you want just a quick way to analyze your content, but you want to delve into it maybe a little bit more from an SEO point of view, you can use Google's natural language API. So it's free to use, where you can just copy and paste your content in. And essentially what it do is it will return all the entities that it finds within that piece of text. And it'll give you what they call a salient score, which essentially is like a correlation of that topic, that entity, how much it relates to the content as a whole. So if you want to rank for a keyword and Google isn't finding that keyword as an entity, or it's finding it, but it's got a very low salient score, then you can start to rewrite the content and work on it to make sure that you get a higher salient score. Higher salient score generally correlates with higher rankings as well. So yeah, they're kind of a few of my top tips. Drake, anything else you want to add to that?
I think you nailed it. I think thinking about it from a PageSpeed's perspective is probably the first one that I would think about right now, especially just leading into 2020. Start working on it now, start thinking about it now. Look at your customers, see what they're built with, and see if there's some small wins that you can figure out today. But then the content piece is huge. You've got to make sure that the content is written properly and making sure that it's structured with structured data to the point where you can start to rank for rich results, 0 clicks, in that position 0 within Google. Starting to really get to that point. That's a little bit more advanced. So that might be a little bit further down our list, but definitely have it in mind. But I think you nailed it.
Yeah, and costs and actual, value of a CDN, depending on the site size, obviously, and what it's built with. But what should I be looking at, and when should I be looking at adding a CDN, and what does it really provide?
Yeah, so the CDN front, there's a couple of different ways to think about it. I would say the first piece to think about is, where is your clientele? Is your clientele just in Arkansas? If that's the case, then a CDN probably doesn't make sense. If your clientele, like Hike, is worldwide, and you have people searching all over the world for your brand and for your website, that is really where a CDN can make a big difference. One, from just a page speed improvement perspective right off the bat. That is an easy check of the box. The CDN basically is a content delivery network. So it's taking your site and caching it when it's called around the world. So from a user perspective, it would be really great there. But then also there's this other perspective of delivering a perfect version for Google via a CDN around the world. So there's a number of different factors that can go in there, but that's how I would think about it as far as like, when should I get started with one?
Awesome. This is perfect. So we have 2 minutes. Say your goodbyes. I think we covered all the questions asked, but any last words? If not, where should they go to get in touch with you two?
So you can find us at hikeseo.co. We've got live chat on the platforms on the website, so it's probably the easiest place to get in contact. We have a specific Facebook group actually for agency owners that want to develop their SEO product further. It's called Hike SEO for Agencies. So we post content on there. We do free orders, just anything that can help you develop your SEO product. So that's another place to find us.
Awesome.
And for Huckabye, it's just huckabye.com, or you can feel free to ping me directly. My email address is just drake@huckabye.com. I'm more than happy to run analysis and kind of sit down with people as well and see if there's any benefit from structured data or dynamic rendering standpoint. I'd be more than happy to set up times and kind of chat through it and see what makes sense for them too.
Awesome, guys. Yeah, feel free to put any links you want in the chat for everyone there, but we'll stop the recording here and see you guys online.